This episode of Ouzo Talk is brought to you by our good friends at the Greek Providore, Milloway Earlwood Wines, and Mooch and Me at Brighton Les Sands. Hey guys, Tom here with a quick note before we get into this episode of Ouzo Talk on the Parthenon Marbles. There's been a lot of activity around the Parthenon Marbles in the days since we recorded this episode that you're about to hear. As you've probably seen, Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis met with his UK counterpart Boris Johnson at 10 Downing Street in London and formally asked for the Parthenon Marbles to be returned. It's a truly exciting development. However, a spokesman for Johnson came out following the meeting with this statement. The possession of the marbles is a matter purely for the British Museum. It's not one for the UK government. The British Museum operates independently of the government. It is free, rightly, from political interference. Any question about the location for the Parthenon sculptures is a matter for them. As you're about to hear, though, that's not what the British Museum thinks, and there's evidence to support that in the form of our guests. There's a lot of finger-pointing happening between the government and the British Museum. The question is, who is finally going to own up and take responsibility? Who is finally going to do the right thing and send the marbles home to Athens? I hope you enjoy this episode of the podcast. Nick, welcome back.
G'day Tom, it's great to be back.
We're here for another episode of Ouzo Talk.
Can you believe this is our 4th episode?
Yep. We obviously had a fantastic episode last time around, talking about barbecues and souvlas, and had a fantastic discussion with some people who knew this stuff, didn't we?
We did. Oh, this is unbelievable. We've got to give a big shout out to all our listeners out there, the people who have written in, liked us on Facebook and texted us with all these wonderful messages. Look, it's been a wonderful support from all you guys. So we love you guys. So keep it up.
I think in the last few weeks we've actually reached around 20 countries now as well. The numbers are steadily increasing. People are getting onto Ouzo Talk and really getting on board, aren't they?
We did, Tom. We got friends in India.
I didn't see that.
We've got listeners in India, Norway, Latvia. Yeah, 20 countries around the world. That is just it's mind-blowing. Yeah, listening to us talk.
It's fantastic.
It is. I love it.
Oh, dear. Well, look, we obviously, again, we had a fantastic discussion about the barbecue. And speaking of the, let's stay with that theme, the marinades and all that sort of thing. Since our last discussion, we've actually been fortunate to have some really fantastic people come on board as sponsors, haven't we?
We have. Look, that barbecue, it ended really well. The meat tasted fantastic. I think we finally settled on the debate on how to cook and what the marinade to use. But lucky we didn't record the second half of that evening, because it was a lot of fun for us, but it wouldn't have been worthy for our listeners.
Not PG.
Not PG, yes, correct. Look, and speaking of marinade, Greek Providore, one of our latest sponsors, brought us a big box of goodies. Tom.
They did. There was some fantastic stuff in there, wasn't there? There were different types of oils. There was some vinegar. There was mountain tea. There was a jar of honey with cocoa in it. It was outstanding. I mean, I was eating it by the spoonful the other night.
Classic. Yeah, look, the rigani, I opened the jar up. It was just, I took a big whiff of it. It was like I was in the mountains of Greece again. It was beautiful, authentic. The pistachio butter was my favourite, I'd have to say. Patricia and Crystal, they're champions. They started this business a year ago. They're from Rhodes and Cyprus.
Lovely girls. They were fantastic.
Yeah, they're awesome. And they're doing a top job. It's premium, it's quality, and their website is out of this side. Did you check out their website, Tom?
I did. There's some fantastic items on there. There's some really high-quality Greek olive oils. The key thing around the Greek Providore is that they're actually picking a lot of these producers individually based on... I mean, they're not creating a large amount of produce. They're going for the quality. It's the yayades and it's the...
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you remember they were talking about the rigani in particular.
Yeah, it's not mass-produced. It's a family thing. The yaya will start harvesting and the grandkids will strip it and they'll jar it. And yeah, it's a family business.
And fantastic as gifts. I mean, the girls are actually putting together Christmas hampers. So if you are looking for Christmas gifts for this year, go to thegreekprovidore.com.au and seriously take a look at the full range. Any sort of foodies that you've got in your family would absolutely love this stuff.
And if you're short of a recipe or two, get on their website as well. They got some amazing recipes, and I had a look at them last night. The spiced double crumbed veal, fantastic. And the spaghetti prawns, green chili and black garlic. I'm just actually salivating thinking about that now. Thank you so much, Patricia, Crystal. You guys rock. We love your business. We love your support. But your website is fantastic. So if you get a chance, get out there. Like their site on Facebook as well. They got some really good clips on Facebook on some of their produce and how it's produced and how it's harvested. So
Absolutely.
check it out, guys. Get out there and like them. They're really good people.
And again, that website is thegreekprovidor.com.au. Now, we have a massive show today as we tackle one of the most contentious issues in Greek modern history, the Parthenon Marbles. It's a massive issue, isn't it, Nick?
It is. It's a huge issue. Every Greek has an opinion on this.
Yep.
Not just Greek. Most citizens around the world. Western civilization is based on this. So it's. I can't wait for you to introduce our guests. We've got some amazing guests in the house today.
We do. So to help us with this discussion, we're fortunate to have the patriarch of movers and shakers to get the Parthenon Marbles home. He's the founder and chairman of the International Organising Committee Australia for the Restitution of the Parthenon Marbles Incorporated, and in general, a man with plenty of stories to tell. We're, of course, speaking about Emmanuel John Comino AM. Welcome, Emmanuel. How are you?
Thank you. Well, thank you, Tom and Nick. Thank you very much for the honor to having us here today.
Thank you so much for being here. And alongside Emmanuel, we're also fortunate to have lawyer and director of the Built Environmental Heritage Group and Cultural Heritage Specialist, Theodora Gianniotis. Welcome, Theodora. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm very impressed you can rattle that out after a few Ouzo.
Yeah, just for context, everyone, we have had a couple of shots already. Everyone in the room is feeling nice and merry for a discussion of this level of importance, right?
Merry but focused.
Absolutely.
It's all part of our pre-brief.
That's right. This is professional. We're keeping it all professional.
It is. The brief is you got to have a sip first.
That's right. And speaking of sips, why don't we have a drink now, Nick? What do you reckon?
Great idea, Tom.
Let's get into it. All right, cheers, guys. Thank you very much for being here. Stiniyamas.
Cheers, welcome.
Naste καλά.
Naste καλά.
All right. Άσπρο μπάτο που λένε. You feeling that?
That was really good, actually.
So we're drinking pilavas today, aren't we, Nick?
We've moved on to Pilavas brand. It's actually one of the favourites of Harry from Milloway Wines.
Yeah. Harry Permaku, I mean, we couldn't go past his favourite Ouzo, could we, for this episode? We went and saw him this week looking for the right bottle to do this episode, and he was pretty adamant that, Pilavas is the best one to go for, wasn't he?
He is. He's a legend. Look, if anyone is around the Elwood area, go and see Harry.
Yeah.
He is a champion. He's got a wealth of experience of anything alcoholic, from wines to spirits to Ouzos. He's a champion. And he's got a story or two to tell, doesn't he, Tom?
Absolutely, yeah. And I mean, he's obviously started a business that's become sort of, a seminal business in Sydney in particular, Milloway Elwood Wines, who are bringing this particular segment to you, obviously around what we're drinking today.
As soon as you walked in, his arms were way above his shoulders. He had a big smile on his face, and he couldn't wait to show us around and tell us what his favourite things were as well. But look, I'm really impressed with what he's done. He actually told us he was never educated. He didn't spend one day at school. He's got a thriving business where he ships his Greek alcohol to 4 countries around the world. He's done an amazing job.
He has, and we thank you very much for bringing Milloway's Elwood Wines on board. Thank you very much. If you haven't been around there, make sure you head over there to Milloway's at some point and, pick up your Greek produce. There's a whole bunch of stuff over there, including fantastic Greek wines, isn't there, Nick?
Funny story, actually, Tom. I think I went in there to buy a bottle of wine. And walked out with a copper priki, incense burner, 4-litre drum of oil, spun a there and a bag of walnuts. It's like the Bunnings of. It's like when you go to Bunnings, you go buy a packet of nails, and you walk out with a whole bunch of stuff. So that's what it is. It's
plus
the Greek
sausage.
Exactly. It's the Greek version of Bunnings, guys. Get in there. He's got everything there. But I'm more impressed with his wines. He's got over a dozen bottles, a dozen ranges of wines, from Skouras, Karavitakis, Lafkiotis, which I've actually managed to... he gave us one as well, which is a really full-bodied red wine. Your Nemo, it is amazing. Yeah. If you love your wines, Greek wines are very underrated. Yeah. Everyone talks about the Italians and the French wine and the Australian wines, but the Greek wines are way up there.
Well, we thank them for coming on board. Milloway's Elwood Wine, 285 Homer Street, Elwood. Thank you so much. And that sort of brings us over to the discussion at hand. So obviously, again, this is a really contentious issue in Greek modern history, and obviously this is all about the Parthenon Marbles. The Acropolis itself is one of the beacons and symbols of Western democracy, isn't it, Nick?
It definitely is. Look, this is a very contentious subject, and we've spoken about this at length.
We did touch on it, didn't we, in episode 1?
We did touch on it in episode 1, but we've had definitely discussions on this in our walks along Brighton Beach.
Absolutely.
But we haven't had the influence of Ouzo as well. So.
Nor have we had such experts with us. We never thought that we'd actually have some people with us who know so much about the topic. And again, we thank Theodora and Emmanuel, again, the patriarch of people trying to bring the Parthenon marbles back to Athens. This is a really complicated issue. It's important that we set it up properly. So in order to do that, we're going to talk a little bit about what the Parthenon means, a little bit of the history behind there first. Sure. So I'm going to take a few minutes here, if you don't mind, Nick.
Because
it's very important.
We're going to set the scene.
Absolutely. So after years of battling the Persians in civilization-defining battles, such as Marathon, Thermopylae, and Salamis, the Athenians emerged victorious and quickly moved to ostracize the architect of their victory, Themistocles. The world's first democracy was now looking for a new leader to elevate the city, and they found what they were looking for in the form of a man named Pericles. An aristocrat by birth, Pericles' father was a successful general, and while his mother came from one of the most distinguished political families in Athens, likely because of those roots, Pericles recognized what the people of Athens now wanted, a city that was fit to rule an empire. What Pericles had in mind was to create a city whose greatness would be admired not only by the Athenians, but by everyone else in the Greek world for generations to come. And he announced that vision for the city-state to the Athenian assembly, saying, "All kinds of enterprises should be created which will provide inspiration for every art, find employment for every hand. We must devote ourselves to acquiring things that will be the source of everlasting fame." Pericles turned his attention to the Acropolis, the city centre which had just 20 years earlier been burnt down by the Persians. The Athenians had left the ruins untouched as a memorial to those killed in the war, but Pericles had grander ideas for the site. He proposed a massive reconstruction plan with a new temple, the Parthenon, at its centre, in honour of the city's patron goddess Athena. The project was unprecedented in scale and cost thanks to the architectural and artistic precision and ingenuity required to execute it. In fact, Pericles planned to spend over 5,000 talents in the first year alone. To put that in perspective, Nick, that's a sum that would be in the billions today.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Absolutely unbelievable. His project would require 20,000 tons of marble and probably more than that. The quarries at Mount Pentelicus, still a functioning quarry today, I might add, became a hive of activity as swarms of workmen traced and carved great blocks of marble out of the mountain. The best architects, sculptors, and craftsmen of all disciplines were gathered from all over the Greek world to bring Pericles' vision to life. Like any major government project, though, it wasn't without its detractors.
Of course.
Some Athenians went so far as to protest that Pericles was decking out the city like a prostitute. But when the building was completed in just 15 years, those critics were well and truly silenced. What emerged was a building that wasn't just the spiritual heart of the city or a statement of Athens' wealth, power, and artistic capability. It was, and is, the symbol of democracy the world over. A monument to architectural and artistic ingenuity, the Parthenon was a groundbreaking building, for despite its seemingly simple shape, there's actually not one right angle in the entire building. A choice made to take advantage of a little-known optical illusion that would make the building look geometrically perfect and grander from every vantage point. The friezes, the sculptures, the artistry, it's all about Athens and the heroism of Athenian democracy in warding off the Persians. Dr. Nigel Spivey from the University of Cambridge says, "Democracy itself becomes heroized in that monument. It's a very democratic thing that wants to include all those citizens who participated in beating off the first great threat to democracy. These are ideals to which you can aspire." Those monuments that Pericles built for his fellow Athenians still stand on the peak of the Acropolis and remain the most striking legacy of classical Athens, and one of the most enduring images of Western civilization. But the story doesn't end there. Mm-hmm. The building and the Acropolis in general has undergone many changes in the thousands of years since. It's withstood millennia worth of natural disasters, religious conversions, cultural changes, bombings, occupations, and more. But despite surviving all those trials largely intact, it was the dubious actions of a British lord that would do the most damage to the building. British ambassador to the Ottoman Empire, Lord Elgin, petitioned the then occupying Ottoman authorities to be able to draw, measure, and catalogue the building. The British Museum today maintains that he was also given permission to remove sculptures from the site. However, no clear evidence of this exists, with only a dubious Italian translation of the firman, or permission, standing as any type of proof. There are many questions about the validity of that document. Between 1801 and 1805, Elgin removed about half of the remaining sculptures from the Parthenon, as well as other buildings surrounding it, such as the Erechtheion. All of Elgin's collection was then transported to Britain, where they were eventually acquired by the British Museum. Elgin's actions were investigated by a British Parliamentary Select Committee in 1816 and were unsurprisingly found to be legal, prior to the sculptures entering the collection of the British Museum by Act of Parliament, which brings us to now and brings us to the people sitting in this room, because there has been a great amount of support to bring those marbles back, hasn't there?
Oh, there has. Look, that's a great summary. You've summed it up perfectly, actually. You've covered everything off.
It was long-winded, but we got there.
It was brilliant. Well done.
Thank you.
You've set the scene now, so I guess a lot of our listeners know where we're at. So everyone knows high level what the story. Yeah, bring them back. Why are they so important? What's the real argument? And that's the purpose of us having this podcast today, to get into the detail, to really get our listeners out and get the message out there. This is the real reason. This is why we want them back. Emmanuel, you want to tell us about yourself? Tell us about where you're from. Tell our listeners a little bit about your background, because you're actually a living legend in my view.
Oh, my background goes back a long way, all right. Well, I was born in Rockhampton, Queensland, in 1933. I'm 88 and 6 months old today.
Don't forget the 6 months.
Yeah,
you reminded
right.
me of that.
And, well, it's on the day, 13th of May.
There you go.
Yeah, right.
So,
13 November.
But at the age of 3, my mother passed away. And my father, who had come out here in 1911 as an 11-year-old little boy, he landed in Sydney. There was no one there to meet him, to take him home or anything. He started walking the streets of Sydney until he got tired of walking. And he sat in a little suitcase and he started to cry till a policeman found him, and all he could say, Greek, me Greek, Greek. That's all he knew. So they took him down the Circular Quay, where there was a fellow, Australian Greek there, and it took him months and months to find out that destination, that little 11-year-old boy, which was Rockhampton. His mother's brother was up there. And
so 11-year-old
boy
as
as well.
On his own, got off at the wrong port.
So one of us, but the authorities made sure that he gets from Sydney to Rockhampton quite safely.
Wow.
And anyhow, then after a while, he married, of course, my mother, and had 2 sons, my year-older brother Peter and myself. And as I said, when my mum died, he decided to go back to Greece for a short holiday.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a short holiday. The Second World War broke out soon after, and we ended up being in Greece in total 9 years.
Wow.
And during this time, at the beginning of the war, we didn't have a home of our own. My father's whole family were here in Australia.
Sure.
That our uncle of ours came in the 1870s, 1880s, going back a long way.
What part of Greece are you from?
What part of Greece?
Yeah.
Kythera. I'm sorry.
Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah, the island of Kythera, they came those days.
Sure.
My great uncle, he jumped ship at 18 years of age and landed in Australia, so I'm told. But while in Greece, of course, it was hard for a lot of people. As I said, we didn't have a home of our own, and we didn't have any clothes or food or anything. And we were going from place to place, from distant relatives, or someone can take us up.
So Emmanuel, at this point in your life, though, were you aware of the marbles as a young child growing up?
No idea, nothing. There was no education during the war in Kythera. There was very little that we learned to read and write. Yeah. That's about all. Okay, and then at the end of the war, my father remarried. We stayed back until we came back with his second wife. And at the age of 14, when I came back to Australia, I couldn't speak a single word of English.
Right.
Not a single word. And they sent me to a school in Gympie for a few months.
Sorry, in Gympie?
In Gympie, Queensland. Well, that didn't last long because, as I said, the teacher couldn't speak Greek, I couldn't speak English, so how much can you learn? Back to Rockhampton, into the cafes, working in the kitchens, like the old story goes. Yeah. But 4 years later, I was called up to serve in the Royal Australian Air Force in Townsville, and that changed my whole life because by this time I could speak a little bit of English, little writing, not much reading and writing, but because I wanted to be a pilot, I had to read and learn to write and everything. So, but my roommates were very, very helpful, very good boys. We still have contacts right to now.
Fantastic.
We have reunions and all that. Unfortunately, all of them passed away by now.
Yeah.
So what happened while I was in the Air Force, something very special. One night, among all the officers, I was sitting next to an Air Commodore from London. He was here on a special mission. It was during the Korean War. After a while, he said to me, Comino, your name is Greek and your name should be Kominos, with an S at the end.
Okay.
And I said to him, oh, no, sir, I'm Australia, not Greek. At that stage, I didn't want to know anything about Greece. I didn't want, because I had bitter memories from the war. I didn't want to be involved anything to do with Greeks or Greece.
Sure.
Especially in the little country town where we went with my father for the cafe, there was no Greeks there at all. So this Air Commodore, he started telling me stories, Greek stories that really fascinating. And he also said to the my co-pilots and members that were there, so, and you, young man, you want to be honoured to have a Greek fighter on your side. You know, make me feel very proud.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So
I mean, were these stories that your father would tell you, or was it?
No.
Really. There was no sort of
where was he going to
entrenchment
learn?
of that?
Where was he going to learn stories? 11 years of age in a cafe.
Yeah.
I didn't have a mother to teach me anything, and she died very young.
Yeah.
And being out in a country town, when we came back, as I said, there were no Greeks there at all.
Yeah.
It was only the cafe, my father's cafe. And if once in a blue moon, if a Greek went past and stopped there to have a meal, because the next town was about 100 miles away, so they had to get the petrol from us and the fruit and all that. So when a Greek came see you, thought, well, Jesus Christ walked into the cafe. You know, you're so pleased to see someone.
Yeah.
You know. So after a while, when I finished from the Air Force, I signed up for 7 years on the active reserve, of course. And 4 years later, they called me up to go to Suez on the war that was there in 1956. Yeah. But it didn't last long, and I was getting married, and 2 weeks before I was to get married, I got a letter, we're not going over. So I didn't see any action, thank God for that. I'm glad we didn't see action. Yeah. We didn't, anyhow. Then when I landed in Sydney and married in 1957, my darling wife Martina, still today, of 65 years marriage, I started getting involved in the Greek community with the church, with AHEPA, the Cathedral Brotherhood, and many other things that came along.
So your Greekness started to come through. So you didn't want to know about Greece initially.
No, but this stage, this Air Commodore changed my thinking, I can tell you.
So that was a pivotal moment for you when that Air Commodore came in.
It was a big moment, because I was young, I was 19 years old at the time.
It's interesting because when you think about Greek history, you take the example of someone like Cleisthenes back, at the dawn of democracy. This is someone that was inspired by the heroes of Greek mythology, aspiring to something greater. And we sort of grow up as Greeks in this in this society as well, sort of looking at those stories and trying to be proud of it. In some ways, it's interesting that for you, Emmanuel, the person that taught you about that was not your blood relatives; it was someone from outside of the culture.
Yes, in a way, you can say that. It played a big part of my life. What this Air Commodore said to me, there's no question about that. Don't forget, I was mixing with Aussies all along. There were no Greeks. And for him to say that to me, and at the time when prejudice was very high, I was called all sorts of names, even my mates, even up in the air, but that was how it was at those days. But while I was in Sydney, then after a while we decided to go to Europe for a holiday. And we didn't go straight to Greece. We went straight to Rome and got a Euro pass to travel around all the country towns because my wife wanted to see the countryside. You can't see anything from the aeroplanes. So every country we went to, she was very keen to go to museums. And every museum we went to, what do you see? Greek antiquities. So when we arrived in Paris, we went to the Louvre, and the very first thing the guide said, I'm going to take you first to the people, I'm going to take you first to the most famous part of the Louvre, the Greek section. Wow. Well, when I heard that, my blood boiled in me, I didn't say anything. When we went inside and started seeing one thing and another, I saw a beautiful statue of Artemis, and I knew a little bit about her because I had joined AHEPA in Sydney, and there was a chapter form about chapter Artemis, and of course they gave a lecture once about who goddess Artemis was. But next door, there she was, goddess Aphrodite. And I remember during the war in Kythera, they were singing a song that πιο πέρα από το καβαμαλιά, πιο πάνω από την Κρήτη και στο τσιρίγο το όμορφο γεννήθη η Αφροδίτη. So straight away went to my mind, I said, what the hell she's doing here? So I said to the guide, it was a lady, I said, excuse me, madam, did you say all these Greek antiquities came from Greece? She said, yes, sir, it's all Greek from Greece. I said, I don't believe you. Tell us the truth. Where is it all from? Oh, no, sir. It's all Greek from Greece. So I turned and I said to her, very angry, And what they're doing here, you thieves, send them back where they belong. She threw her arms up in the air and walked away. I said, nothing to do with me, sir. But this tall American standing next to me, he put his arms around my shoulder and said, you're right, man, you tell them they've got no business being here.
Yeah.
And that's where it all started.
Really?
From that very moment, I said to myself, when I get back to Australia, I'm going to form a committee to get everything back,
Wow.
all the antiquities back.
Was this
If you
in
read my
London?
motion, if you read my original motion that I passed in AHEPA, took me 5 years to form a committee, because when I come back, they all thought I was mad when I was talking about forming a committee to get the marbles back, antiquities. But anyhow, after the Louvre, we went to London, and my wife said to me, no more museums for you.
He was reprimanded.
You've been barred.
Yeah, so I didn't see the Parthenon Marbles that year
Not allowed
because we didn't go. And when after a few days, when I calmed down, I said, "Let's go." We went, and it was a bobsleigh. We didn't go in, so I said, "That's it, finished." So then we flew to Athens, and that's when it all started. The first thing, my cousin took me up to the Parthenon, and he was born in Rockhampton, a year older than me, but he was highly educated. His Greek is better than any Greek professor because he was teaching English in Greece to lawyers, professional people, right? And he told me a lot about the Parthenon. And on the way down, they were selling books. I bought 3 books from there. And we stayed quite a few weeks and months in Greece. That trip was a long trip.
Yep.
And I read all those books before I got back to Australia.
Sorry,
And
Emmanuel, what year was this?
That was 1976.
So
That was
1976.
1976, June, July 1976. But we come back was September 76. And immediately I started giving talks, small talks, and the small talks got bigger and bigger. And thanks to the Greek National Tours Organisation and the National Bank of Greece at the time, they had an office in Pitt Street, Sydney.
Right.
And they provided me with some excellent books with some beautiful photographs in there, to which I borrowed them off them, and cost me a lot of money to take them to specialists those days to make slides out of them.
Right.
Okay, and I have slides that nobody else has when I give a lecture and show the truth what I'm telling to people, right?
Yep.
But the thing is that at the beginning, nobody wanted to support me, or as I said, they were just telling me I'm stupid, I'm vlakas, I copped everything, even from my own relatives.
Were there other people at the time that had thought about this as a concept to try and get these antiquities back?
No, not one. I spoke to professors and everybody. The only person that supported me was Professor Emmanuel Aroni. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He's a lovely man, wonderful person, a great friend of mine. He actually supported me because I said to Emmanuel, at the next national convention was in Adelaide. That's a AHEPA national convention. Every year they go to different state those days, state. And this year was in Adelaide, October 1981. And I said to him, I'm going to move a motion. If you pass it, will you support me? He said, of course I'll support you. So I drafted a motion and took it to the national convention. And I showed it to a friend of mine by the name John Q. Soglus, who's one of the very first, if not the first, Greek Australian judge.
Right.
And very good friend. And he said, of course I'll support you, Emmanuel. So he supported the motion. The motion passed unanimously. And I was giving full authority from AHEPA to act on behalf of AHEPA without any questions from anybody. Just give my report once a year. And that's been going on ever since. I still give my report. I don't have to, but in respect, I still give my report every year.
Right.
Okay. Is that the beginning of the movement?
That's the beginning. It started in 1981. Officially, the first committee in the world was formed. I was told by professionals in Greece that it was the first committee. I thought there might be other committees in Greece. I said, no, there was no other committee. People might have talked about it, but no committees.
So Australians are at the forefront in many ways.
Our committee is the first committee in the world. That's why all my members of the committee are very proud of our committee.
And it's all because of you, Emmanuel.
Because
it's all because of you.
Oh, well, I know better. It just happened the way it happened.
Yeah.
And let me say this. When you talk about the Parthenon, as you correctly said, it was built in 447 to 432 BC. It took 15 years to build, and it did take 20,000 tons of marbles to build it. The Parthenon is the architectural wonder of the world still today. Remember this, no other building on earth has ever equaled its beauty, symmetry, and symbolism. No other building. It is the supreme achievement of beauty in all recorded history and reflects the indestructibility of Hellenism. That's what the Parthenon reflects.
That's very
and
important.
It's been through wars, raping by men and all sorts of things, and it still stands there in solitaire. To remind us why it was built, as you mentioned earlier.
I think this is a good point to bring Theodora in as well, because Theodora, you're a cultural heritage expert in many ways. In your opinion, why is this building, and why has that particular site elicited so many strong views? Why is it so important today, not just to Greeks, but to Western democracy as well?
From a cultural heritage perspective, the answer is quite interesting because it's a living cultural heritage. It's not something that was built, forgotten, and the culture is lost. Mm-hmm. And Emmanuel has touched on that in a very interesting way. He's someone who was disconnected with their Greek culture and has been, brought back in by this incredible building. So if we think about, and we did this experiment through our committee, everyone, when they go to Greece, has a pilgrimage to the Parthenon, no doubt. And we asked people, give us your favourite photo of you on the Parthenon. Yeah. It starts from, this was the last photo my parents took before they migrated here, to this is me in my 20s on my Kentucky tour, and this is me going back 20.
One of those photos.
Okay, we've all got,
Yeah, good point. I've got many.
Yeah, there you go. And, to, this is me with my kids 10 years later in the same spot. It's an intergenerational understanding of a monument. That means so much. And I think the key that both yourself and Emmanuel have picked up, it's a symbol of democracy. And when we look at those friezes and, they're all symbolising this incredible new philosophy. Mm-hmm. If we just pause to think of that, where free persons, we'll say men because the women weren't free at the time, we know that, that's a whole different podcast. Yep. Free persons were able to overcome this authoritarian rule. Yeah. So for when we look at the Parthenon and there's this pilgrimage, subconsciously there's a pride of connecting with that. That's why when we see the symbolism of a Nazi flag during Greek occupation, it didn't just cut to it cut to the soul of what it meant to be Greek, that freedom. No one tells us we can't be free as Greek. If anything, if someone tells us do something, it's our freedom of choice. Say, no, I'm not going to do it, even if we know that's the right thing. That's a Greek thing, right? Yep. Throughout the history of the Parthenon that you very articulately put, so I don't know why I'm here. You've got it covered right there. The history of the Parthenon was always to capture the Parthenon, because it wasn't just a monument or the best strategic place. It represented something a lot more. Yeah. So from a cultural heritage perspective, it's very easy to muddy the waters that we're not connected with the Parthenon as Greeks today. That is wrong. That is wrong. It's and not only has it given the world these incredible insights in science and architecture, it's still in the way the Greek government is, conserving, and we'll get to that. It's still giving incredible research and insight into the monument that we had never understood before. Yeah. So the importance, and we're seeing, in Emmanuel's story, and you asked Emmanuel, in that time, did anyone think about ever reuniting the Parthenon marbles? Well, when we're talking about the 70s, if something was in a museum, it stayed in a museum. Yeah. No one was asking, where did this come from? What was the story behind this? Yeah. There's been a shift in that understanding. We're seeing it in museums all over the world, where there's more stories to be told of how something reached a museum and what's the ethical factor behind that. Yeah. And this is where, we'll get into the discussion why it's important to focus on the debate on what the Greek government is trying to achieve here, and not to muddy the waters with various other conversations and what this committee is focused on.
Yeah, right. So you've touched on a couple of things there, like they're not just a bunch of marbles, like you said. You really focus on it's the Parthenon marbles, and you mentioned the Nazi flag. As you know, through history, there was two students. One was Inglesos. What were their names, Tom?
Manolis Inglesos, I think it was, who I think, Emmanuel, you'll probably be able to correct us if we're wrong, but Manolis Inglesos, along with one of his friends, were noted for climbing the Acropolis post-Nazi occupation and ripping down the Nazi flag. And in addition to that, there's another story about an Evzona who was told to take down the Greek flag as the Nazis were beginning their occupation. And when he did do that, he wrapped himself in it and threw himself off the rock to his death.
Committed suicide.
These are not the types of reactions that you would expect from someone for, an everyday building or an everyday an everyday structure. This is people who understood the value of this building well before people like Emmanuel and
freedom,
came
not only the building,
along.
and freedom, the value of freedom as well, the Greeks.
It is. So it's
Absolutely.
more than just marbles. Like we said, people committed suicide. If you desecrated these marbles in any way, putting a foreign flag on there, it was desecrated by it. But young Greek kids committed suicide.
Yeah.
And this is my point as well, that this is in our living memory, or our parents' living memory. So the layers of history, and this is one of the arguments, that the Parthenon's disconnected to the current Greeks. It's not their cultural heritage, it's the cultural heritage of the ancient Greeks, and you don't have a right to it. Well, I mean, that argument falls short and fell on many things,
When you have people committing suicide over it, a foreign occupying power trying to in some way take control of it. These are not the actions of people who don't understand or revere that building.
But you got to set the scene as well. There was Nazi flags all through Athens. It was fine, but Parthenon,
exactly.
No. Acropolis, no.
And I will guarantee you, the Nazis knew to put a Nazi flag, and we digress, as many occupying countries did, on the Parthenon, or why people take pieces of the Parthenon.
Yeah.
It is a tangible, living memory of freedom. It's as simple as that. Why did the British want it? It gave them legitimacy. Why is the British Museum not giving them back? It gives them legitimacy to their ideal that they are the holders of democracy. Well, here's the news flash. You didn't invent it. We did. And there's living memory that still own that pride. And so we'll get into that discussion. But
now, look, it's a good point that you raise as well. So, again, there's so many Greek antiquities out there in so many museums. That's fine, great, keep them. It's only the Parthenon marbles. So we've got to make that clear. It's only the Parthenon marbles we want back. There's other buildings in the Acropolis, that's fine. It's the Parthenon ones that we want back.
Good point there, very good point. As I said, my motion in October 91 read that we get everything back, right? In 1983, when the British Committee was formed by Melina Mercouri, the first thing that the then chairman, Professor Robert Browning, a wonderful person, he wrote to me and he asked me for support. And he said, our committee is only for the Parthenon marbles, not for the whole things from around the world. And of course I went along because Melina Mercouri came out the same year and we had discussion briefly.
Did you meet her? You met her?
Of course
obviously.
I met her. I have photographs with her. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I even kissed her. She kissed me on the cheek, in fact, when she was leaving.
There you go. Melina was a famous actress in the time. What movie did she play?
We were invited, a few of us, about 25, at the Premier's office to meet her when she came to Sydney. I showed to her guy that was with her the last letter that she had sent me, so I gave it to him, and he walked across the room, so he let much away and showed it to her, and when she looked at it, you should have seen her face. She went like this, and I was like, where is he? Across the road. So she came right across the road and embraced me, and started talking, because I had written to her there was rumours in Sydney that she was coming, so I wrote a letter to her if she's coming, if she can find a little bit of spare time from a busy schedule to discuss the campaign, which we did. So that's when I met her and took the photograph. And I remember when she was leaving, she came up and she said to me, «Αγόρι μου, να μην σταματήσεις ποτέ στον αγώνα για την επιστροφή τα μάρμαρα του Παρθενώνα στην Ελλάδα μας». In other words, my boy, they never stopped the campaign for the return of the Parthenon marbles to Greece. And I turned around and I said to her in English, I will fight until England promised to send them back, or until the day I die. And that was what she hugged me and she kissed me.
Wow, what a story.
And just on that, in regards to the focus, Greece's request for the final return of the Parthenon sculptures has been on the agenda for the Intergovernmental Committee of UNESCO since 1984, every single time it is. So when people say, what is Greece doing? I mean, this is a long, hard fought battle, and Greece has been working hard, not just, and we'll get into it, I guess, from a diplomacy, but this has been raised with UNESCO since 1984, and if you're thinking, and you're looking at Emmanuel and his campaign, 1981, it's a long road, but cultural heritage, repatriation is not a straight road.
Yep.
And there's a lot to be learnt and a lot to do in this area.
So what is the Greek government actually asking for?
Can I answer this? I have spoken to 3 different ministers for culture from 3 different political parties in the same office.
Yep.
I asked the same question, I got the same answer. That Greece is not at all interested in going to court under any circumstances with Great Britain. They want to work diplomatically, politically, and through UNESCO.
Right.
And they're doing excellent work. And they have had, I won't use names, that went there and tried to tell Greece how to get the marbles back, you know, which is ridiculous. They know what they're doing. They have experts advising them. They don't need smart Alex like me or anybody else to tell them how to get the marbles back, you know, including myself in. As I said, they have the experts, the best people working, as Theodora said. UNESCO is behind them 100%.
Right.
And when you have people from around the world, top people, for example, you have a president of the United States of America, President Clinton, when he was president of the United States, he was asked a question, and it's known fact. He said, if it's up to me, I'll send it back. And Prince Charles, about 15 years ago, thereabouts, maybe a bit more, I can't remember, he too said he thought it was time that the marbles to go back. Now, those statements have been made. And you have other many distinguished English people in England that have come out and openly debates, and also they have won all debates in England. And you have people from around the world that's supporting it. So this is a good thing. People from all around the world. I went to New Zealand and formed a committee there, and I went over quite a few times and gave lectures. And the New Zealand Parliament, the chairman that I put on was what's his name? Can't think of it at the moment. He a lovely man. He was a minister in the New Zealand government, and I made him chairman. And I used to go to New Zealand every year, sometimes twice a year, and go to Parliament and speak to the politicians then. And on the 25th of May 2007, the New Zealand Parliament unanimously passed a motion to support the return of the marbles.
Right.
Now that's a big achievement. English-speaking country like New Zealand, and very close associated with the British, with England, right?
Are there other countries who have made similar moves? What's Australia's position on this?
Well, there's not a politician in Australia. I've written to the Prime Ministers. They're all in favour. There wouldn't be one politician in Australia who's against the return of the Parthenon marbles. Plus the fact they know they have their own things that they want back, as you know.
Can I ask the most obvious question here? Why don't they bring them back? Why aren't the British Museum bringing the marbles back to Athens?
Okay. Originally,
what's their side?
I'll answer your question. Originally, I used to write to all the Prime Ministers in England, and the original reply, excuse, was that we haven't got anywhere to put them. And Athens got too much pollution and they'll deteriorate. And in England, more people will see them in London than in Athens. That was
surely
the
that's
first
now
excuse.
debunked.
As time gets better and better, I keep writing. And the last letter that I've written to the Prime Minister, even to this Prime Minister, but to May as well, the reply comes that they took them, this is what they're saying now, they took the marble according to the law of the time. So Russell and I will reply to this. Russell Darnley is the secretary of our committee, lovely man. Russell Darnley, RYM. He's in Singapore. He's coming back, thank goodness, next week. He's been away for 3 years. And I said to them in a letter to the British Prime Ministers, according to the law at the time, you were selling human beings as slaves. How does that stand today? Can you go up on the Acropolis and pick up a stone, just a stone off the ground? You'll go to jail. They catch you. They're not raping the building. So that business about all the excuses are gone. There's no excuses anymore. What's holding it up? I can't say it on radio. I know what's holding it up. I can't say it openly.
Well, I think just going on from there a bit, if we take a step back and have a look, what are the Greeks been doing? I mean, and this is where my interest came into the campaign. So in 2007, I, collaborated with Sydney Uni in the Faculty of Architecture, because I thought one of the biggest things missing from the debate was pretty much what Emmanuel said. Greece has nowhere to put them. They can't look after their cultural heritage. There's too much pollution, blah, 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 blah. Let's take a step back from the Parthenon marbles. Now, if anyone's visited Greece, they definitely know there's a museum on every corner that's looking after whatever ancient artefacts there are. There's the FODS in place that have, world's best practice when it comes to archaeological sites. And, if you go up north and you see, the Tafo Verina, the Filippo, in situ
Fantastic
museums,
places.
museums that have won cultural awards and museum awards 100 times over. One of the arguments of the debate that I saw missing was that Greece didn't know how to look after cultural heritage. And I went to Greece in about 2006, 2005, and I saw the incredible restoration work that was happening through ISMA on the Parthenon. Now, we're talking about absolute prototype work from curatorial, from scientific, structural engineer, work that's never ever been done in conservation for a World Heritage site. This is groundbreaking work. I mean, we're getting to a point now where we've got this incredible work happening on the conservation of a World Heritage site, and we've got these Parthenon marbles completely unconnected with a site. And there is another argument where the British Museum say, well, why do you need all of them? Well, isn't it part of archaeology that you find pieces and you unite them back to the site where they belong to tell the full story? And there'll never be a completeness of the study and the understanding of the Parthenon without these sculptures being returned because of this groundbreaking work. And it is frustrating to hear what is the Greek government doing? And, I encourage everyone to go on the ISMA site, publications year after year. The laser technology taken to clean the marbles is absolute state of art, which, will then take us into the discussion of how the British have looked after the Parthenon marbles. So it's a long bow to draw for them to say Greeks don't know how to look after cultural heritage. The scientific, it's carrying on that tradition of, as we started this discussion, the science given to the world from the construction of the Parthenon is now given to the world through the preservation and the conservation of the Parthenon. And that is the symbolism of what the Parthenon is meant to do, educate, inspire. And we're getting to the point now where we're going to be telling the British how to look after our cultural heritage if these marbles aren't returned, which is a ridiculous situation because they don't know how to look after them. And there's been scandal after scandal. Even now, there was the cleaning scandal, which we can go into, and they can dismiss it and say, it was just a sort of, maintenance guy that decided to scrub them white. No, it was, they believed, and Devane believed, that those marbles should be white without the proper historic research to support what should have been done in conservation. Went against every conservation practice.
In reality, that building was very colourful.
It was very colourful. And what they've done is they've scraped off the patinas that were there.
With a steel brush.
With a steel brush. And anyone involved in
So
heritage...
evidence is gone.
The evidence is gone. So anyone that's involved in heritage knows that we follow very strict guidelines, even here in Australia, the Borough Charter, of how marble or paint or patina is to be used. And it doesn't matter how old it is, you've got to preserve it. So, it went against every practice known, even then, even as basic as it was back then, it went against every practice known. So it's frustrating. It's frustrating to hear that the Greek government, do they know what they're doing? Please go to the ISMA sites to see the publications and the works and the groundbreaking work that they're pushing through in cultural heritage conservation to see what the Greek government is doing.
I'm given to understand that either the knowledge that's been sort of accumulated from the Parthenon restoration project, or even the same teams that are sort of at the centre of helping that restoration, are actually also at the centre of works being done on the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem. Is that right?
The work done on the Holy Sepulchre was because of the groundbreaking work and the understanding of how marble sits and how it moves. All of that came from specialists that were dealing with the Parthenon because, we've learnt new understandings of how marble can be. And I'm no specialist. There's laboratories set up to deal with this. How marble responds to stabilisation or instabilisation or to weather and all those factors.
So can I ask a question? Is the damage done now? So the marbles are at the British Museum. So we're saying how we restore it now. What can we do now? So,
Excuse me, what do you mean by restore them? Put them back where
so
they
they're already in the British Museum. Is the
Yeah.
damage done now?
Yeah, but you could never restore them back to where they were.
Correct.
And as Dora said, they scraped, as you know,
Yeah.
in the 1930s with chemicals and wire brush and all that. Even, the dust that came off, even that dust belongs to the Parthenon.
Yeah.
That dust belongs to Greece, not to the British Museum, okay? And the latest technology in Greece now, with the colours, they clean them, and the original colours are still there, very faintly, where in the 1930s they scraped them all off. There's nothing there.
So it's
I
evident
also had
they've
my slides
destroyed
here, I can show you something.
Yeah.
But I guess going back to your questions, damage done. Okay, they're there. Elgin took them. We get that. This is another chapter of the Parthenon marbles. Now, it's up to the British Museum if they want to be heroes.
Yeah.
Okay. Museums have changed. They're changing. Yes, they're not going to be the same marbles. They're going to go into the Acropolis Museum. They're not going to go up on Parthenon.
No way.
All of that's been taken down anyway. That's just, the conservation of a World Heritage Site worldwide. That's what you do. There's an opportunity for, the British museums to really step up and say, this is an opportunity to build diplomacy and to say whatever Elgin did. And all of this arguments, these have all been created by the British Museum to muddy the waters.
Yeah.
They were illegally taken of a country under occupation. The argument is really as simple as that. And that country has not been given the opportunity of self-knowledge in reinterpreting its cultural heritage.
Well, let's take a look at what the British Museum actually says. Let's see what their official position is. So what they say on their website is the museum is a unique resource for the world. The breadth and depth of its collection allow a global public to examine cultural identities and explore the complex network of interconnected human cultures. The trustees lend extensively all over the world, and over 3.5 million objects from the collection are available to study online. The Parthenon sculptures are a vital element in this interconnected world collection. They're a part of the world's shared heritage and transcend political boundaries. The Acropolis Museum allows the Parthenon sculptures that are in Athens, about half of what survives from the ancient world, to be appreciated against the backdrop of Athenian history. The Parthenon sculptures in London are an important representation of an ancient Athenian civilization in the context of world history. Each year, millions of visitors, free of charge, admire the artistry of the sculptures and gain insight into how ancient Greece influenced and was influenced by the other civilizations that it encountered. The trustees firmly believe that there's a positive advantage and public benefit in having the sculptures divided between two great museums, each telling a complementary but different story. So that's obviously the British Museum's position. We've actually reached out to the British Museum to seek clarification on a couple of things, and they haven't been forthcoming with a response up until the time of recording. We hope that they will come back to us at some point. One of the key questions that I asked them was, whilst the benefits of having half of the surviving sculptures in the British Museum are well documented, from an academic and historical perspective, does the British Museum see any downside in their presence in the UK? And that's a very important question, because from an academic perspective, where you need to look at both sides of the story and need to consider all these things, there's never been any information forthcoming about what is the downside of actually having those sculptures living so many thousands of kilometres away inside the Devine Gallery.
On the 1st of April, I think it was 2004, the deputy director of the British Museum was out here, and I was giving talks on some coins, some University of Macquarie, and I went there with our legal advisor Jordan Atonopoulos, your cousin, one night, and with Russell Darley the other night.
Top bloke.
And
Your cousin, Nick, is he?
We exchanged.
There you go.
By marriage.
we exchanged cards. We spoke nicely. We weren't rude or anything, and so.
That's not like your family, Nick.
Yeah.
I'm just joking.
I wrote to the
good boy,
Prime
Jordan.
Minister, I think it was Tony Blair at the time, and I asked him about with regards to sending the marbles, etc., etc. His reply was that the British Museum have passed that they can't give anything back original, only copies or something of no value. So I wrote to the British Museum, because to the Deputy Director, which I met out here, I can't think of his name offhand,
It's okay.
and his reply was, for the British Museum to send the marbles back, it needs an act of Parliament. So what does that tell you? They're tossing the ball backwards and forwards. The British Museum says up to the British government. The British government says it's up to the British Museum.
Okay.
Until they're going to get tired kicking the ball backwards and forwards. That's what
and
it's all about.
and that's happened as recently as last month.
And that's it's very easy for them to say, not my problem.
It's passing
but
the buck.
We all know our friend Boris had comment and weighed in on it as well. So if it's not your issue and it's not a British government issue, don't weigh in. You know, he made comment that they're never going to go back.
The other question that Ouzo Talk has asked the British Museum is, in light of UNESCO's recent resolution and recommendation to negotiate with the Greek government, in addition to the British government's stance that all decisions relating to collections are taken by the museum's trustees, is the British Museum at all moved by what appears to be a considerably strong public sentiment against the current position on the Parthenon marbles and calls for them to be repatriated? Again, no response, but obviously this is a political hot potato in many respects, and they're just kicking it back and forth.
And I have to go back to your original question and the comment and the statement of what the British Museum says on their website. Now, if we go through it sentence by sentence, it's pretty offensive. Who made them World Cultural Heritage Police?
Yeah.
You know, there's incredible amount of, and this is another very big topic, but there's an incredible amount of cultures that have stories to tell of how those objects were plundered. And those stories have not been told. We've been told these stories, and this is the shift that's happening in museums, through a very white historical lens. And there's another story to tell, and it's been very easy to dismiss the claims, which they have done, where Greece has said, these are ours. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. We're the British Museum, and we know how to look after these things better than you. There's nothing that's not offensive about that. Not just to our culture, but to many other cultures. And this is the shift that is happening in many museums. And many museums are really stepping up. And if they want to keep their doors open, and if they want to stay relevant, they've got to... There's no doubt, history is ugly. It's ugly. Things have happened that shouldn't have happened, but here's an opportunity to step up and say, this is another chapter in the Parthenon Marbles history, and it's time to make that right. And they've got an opportunity to do that. Greece is not asking for everything. They're not asking for the floodgates to open. They're asking for it because, as I started this conversation, holding on to pieces of the Parthenon is something tangible, that you're holding a piece of where freedom was born. And that's a legitimacy they want.
Yeah.
And that's where that comes down to philosophically. Now, either you put them in a museum, and museums tell stories. That's what the new, museums once were places of curiosity boxes, unattached, no stories behind them. Now we're seeing these great, amazing museums that are telling stories, digital stories, and that's what you're seeing when you go into the new Acropolis Museum. You're seeing this continuation of a story, and that's where they belong, to tell that continuation of that story. Not a curiosity box, not pieces of art. These are a philosophical that belong to a sacred site in Greece that is still in our living memory as living Hellenes.
That's a good point. Sorry, quick question for you. So the friezes, they're 160 metres long. Is that correct? Is it safe to say that it's one piece?
I'm hopeless at numbers. You've got to ask numbers to Emmanuel because that's an 88-year-old
That's okay.
bonus.
I read it last night.
Good.
So
84 metres.
is it
65 panels.
There you
of it.
go.
okay? There you go. So
Thank you.
is it safe to say this is a piece of artwork that's split in two?
Yeah,
Is it like
it's
saying
split in two, and it's split in two in some of the in a horrendous way. So it's not. There's pieces that are, a corner here, a head there, bits of the.
Because it tells one story, doesn't it? There's
of
192 figures in there in honour of the all those that died at the Battle of Marathon. I think the question that Nick's getting at is splitting that in half, or 60-40.
No, because I think what we need to understand, it's not split in half nicely. So you have the beginning of the battle, and we have the end of the battle.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to get at is it like
that's not right. That's all.
Is it like saying the statue of David? We've chopped his head off and we've sent it to London and bits in Rome
and other bits of his anatomy. somewhere else. It gets even worse than that because one of the ears could be somewhere else. A bit of the curl of the hair is somewhere else.
Take Mona Lisa. Take Mona Lisa. Cut her head off and put her somewhere else.
Yeah.
That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's even more shattered because going back to the damage Elgin caused, when these pieces were falling, they were smashing. Yeah. And there's anecdotal evidence that they could hear this marble smashing to the ground. So he didn't saw it off, put that aside. He didn't saw it off in the way we're looking at conservation now. He was just, you know what? I'm getting away with this. I'm just going to keep cutting.
Sorry, can I just interrupt?
Excuse me. I want to come into this because this is very serious what we're talking about.
Sure.
First of all, let's make one thing very clear. He had no authority whatsoever. He did not have a firman. A firman could only be given by the Sultan. They claim that he got a firman on the 5th of July, 1801.
Sorry, Emmanuel, can you explain what a firman is?
Okay, a firman is a document that only the Sultan in Turkey, right, puts his stamp on it, which is called a struber, I can't pronounce struber or something. If he hasn't got that on, it's not a firman.
Okay, right. And what does the firman do?
And only the Sultan can issue a firman. Now, we know for fact.
Is it a document?
It's of course a document,
It's legislative?
Document. It's a document. It could be anything.
It's whatever. Like a rule.
But to make it a law, to make it official, it's got to have this stamp on the struber by the Sultan. And the Sultan, we know on the 5th of July, what they claim they got the firman on the 5th of July, he was not in Constantinople. He was in Egypt celebrating the war, the victory over the French between the Turks and the British. They defeated the French.
So he wasn't even there when they claim he was there. He wasn't even in Constantinople in July.
No, he wasn't in Constantinople at the time, no. And if you read Dimitris Vassiliadis, the professor from Crete, if you read George Bezos and his two colleagues from Johannesburg, they wrote 36-page memorandum. They did a huge research about the document, we're talking about the firman.
And can we just pause?
A huge research.
Emmanuel, can you just explain to us who George Bezos was, just so we get some grounding?
George Bezos was the lawyer who got Nelson Mandela out of jail after 27 years.
Wow.
Right? A wonderful person and a great lawyer. And his two colleagues from Johannesburg, that they did, as I said, this 36-page of memorandum on the legality of the firman. That the British kept telling us that he had authority. He had no authority whatsoever to do anything. Right. All he was supposed to do is make drawings and plaster casts, as you said at the beginning. And that started not in Constantinople. That started from London before he left. He was renovating his mansion in Scotland, Lord Elgin. A huge, I still got photos of that building. And the architect, Mr. Harrison, who was an architect in the Greek style, and he suggested to him that while you're in Constantinople, it gives you a great opportunity to take with you qualified people to make actual architectural drawings and plaster casts in order to improve the fine arts in Great Britain. So he took this up with a great enthusiasm. He's going to improve all the fine arts in Great Britain. It's a long story, I'm not going to go into it, but when he got to Constantinople, his priest and secretary, Dr. Reverend Philip Hunt, when he went to Athens, the Turks would not allow him to go up there. They would not allow them. Right. So it took a lot of talking with Lord Elgin back in Constantinople. It cost him £5 per day, those days a lot of money, £5 per day, to allow his men to go up from sunrise to sunset to make drawings, plasticar. And that lasted for 3 months, from February to May 1801. And then they were ordered out of there for some unknown reason. And this is where the trouble started. His priest, Dr. Reverend Philip Hunt, and the artist that he had hired from Italy, Giovanni Battista Lucieri, they wrote to Lord Elgin, begging him to obtain an authority of some kind, whether it was a firm or something, to allow his men to go back up in the Acropolis to continue the excellent work that had been done by drawings and plaster casts, not removing anything, right? Okay. When they went back to the Acropolis, let's just say, it was some sort of a document. We don't know what it was. No one's ever seen anything. After a while, and they were allowed to go only for a few hours up and down. After a few days, Dr. Reverend Philip Hunt asked the Turkish military the governor, actually, the Dastar. The Dastar is the military governor up in the Acropolis, and the Vavet is the governor of Athens. So he asked the Vavet, the governor of Athens, for permission to take down one of the metops. And he hesitated on the day. He said that you got no authority to remove anything from the sculpture. But British historians who are witnessing this thing, they're telling us that with threats and bribes, remember that with threats and bribes, he managed to win the day again. So on the 31st of July 1801, the very first thing comes down to the Parthenon was a matop. The next day, another one. Can you imagine the enormous amount of damage inflicted to the building and to the sculpture, ripping it out in one day? It took the Greeks with the best qualified people, engineers and architects, months and years to take them out properly, professionally, and place them in the new Acropolis Museum. And they ripped them out in one day.
But there is a firman in the British Museum written in Italian.
That is not even a firman. As I said, it's not signed by the Sultan. There's no stamp on it. It's Abdullah Khaimah Khan, who was just an officer.
It's a copy, isn't it?
And it's a copy of an Italian translation.
And it was originally, so they say, or originally was written in Turkish. Originally, they say it was written in Turkish and translated into Italian, and from Italian into English. Now, if that was meant for the British ambassador, why was it translated into Italian?
Yeah.
If it was written in Turkish.
So it was written in Turkish, but no one can find this Turkish.
No, there's never ever been found a document, an original document, even on that translated English one. The Italian one, yes, Italian one, but not the original Turkish one.
It's important to mention as well that the Ottomans were quite good at holding records.
I was just going to say that, excuse me, Tom, I was just going to say that. Another good friend of mine, Dean David Rudenstein, who is on the University of New York, historian, and he's been to Constantinople on occasion. We sat on 2 international conferences with David Rudenstein. He's written books and everything on the legality. And he told me when we were in New York in 2002, he says, Manuel, I've been to Constantinople. There is no records whatsoever. The Turks keep excellent records. You can go back, and on the 5th of July that they claimed that he got the firman, there is nothing there on the 5th before or after. No. Right. Nothing at all. So he had no authority. Believe me, then the British know now. He had no authority whatsoever to remove a single piece from the Parthenon, let alone break the building.
Look, I can vouch for that. Just a bit of a side note. My ancestors grew up in a town called Labanitsa, which is now called Elataria. I have a document at home written in Arabic of who lived in that village in 1579. And this was written in Arabic. So I've got all the family names. So this is testament to how well the Ottomans documented everything. This is a little village in Ipiro, and I've got that. I'm actually trying to get it translated. So there's 50-odd families that lived in this village, and I've got this document at home. So something as important as this, surely it'll be kept somewhere.
And I think at this point we also need to mention the character of Elgin. Elgin looted.
Good point. I'm sure a lot of our listeners wouldn't know who this guy is. Do you know a little bit about him? Give us
a little bit about him. Elgin was a Scottish lord.
Yeah. He had served as officer in the British Army. He had served as consul general before. He was appointed ambassador. And he married, what made all the difference, he married a very, very rich young lady, the Nisbets, who were in £18,000 income per annum in those days. And she was the only child. Right, Mary Nisbet, and he relied on her fortune, and that's why he went broke at the end when they divorced, when they separated.
He did go broke, but the evidence of his looting is another great work being undertaken by the Greeks off Kythera is the wreck of the Mentor. Right. So carrying these marbles across, the ship sunk, and he had to get the Cytherians to dive to get the loot. Now, he wouldn't tell them what was there.
They're all Emmanuel's ancestors.
No.
Yeah, so he wouldn't tell them the marble. He lied about the marbles. He goes, "Just get me the crates." This is me talking. I'm acting now.
What he said was stones of no value. He was telling people stones of no value. And they murdered a Cytherian. I haven't got his name. I'd had his name once and I lost it. They tried to stop them. Right. Because now they have found the Mentor with 17 cases originally. Okay, it was the first one that was going. It was Lord Elgin's ship, his own ship, and they found some coins and pistols and that type of thing.
Well, no, it was more than that, and it was a systematic looting that Elgin was undertaking, and at the end, he thought, you know what, why take the casts?
Let's go one better.
Let's go one better, and the evidence of his looting is, part of, maritime archaeology happening in Greece now. I think one of your young boys, John Fardoulis, was very much involved in that as well, another Aussie. He had a sister, and not only that, his father was the same. Looting
I was going to say, so what did they do with it? Did they
looting
sell it?
was
Did he
a
put it in a
thing.
museum?
Well, yeah, that's right. Either they put them in private collections, and we see it all the time. Where has this come from?
Did he on-sell them
Well,
to make a profit? Was it purely a business?
Elgin himself, he had to sell them to pay the debt. Isn't that right, Manuel?
I'll tell you exactly what happened. As you mentioned, the select committee was appointed, and a member of the select committee, Sir John Newport, said about Lord Elgin that the Honourable Lord has taken advantage of the times, and it seemed fatal that a representative of our country loot those objects. The word looting comes in British Museum by a member of the British Museum Parliament, Sir John Newport, right? And that the Turks and other barbarians had considered them sacred. So they moved to buy them for £35,000, and straight away another member of Parliament, H. Hammersley, he moved amendment to buy them for £25,000, but be kept as trust in the British Museum until such time Greece is a free nation, and to be given back with no questions asked, no further procedure.
Okay.
That's the exact word, right? And that motion, unfortunately, did not go through.
Right.
And they ended up buying for £35,000. But they didn't give him £35,000. They took £18,000 out of that to pay off some of his creditors. So soon after that, he left and he went to Paris, where he died in Paris in 1851 at 75 years
So it
old.
wasn't a good business venture for
And
him,
living
was it?
behind £150,000 debt. You know how much money that is these days? £150,000 debt in 1841.
No.
It's a lot of money.
That'd be ridiculous.
I just said I'm not the numbers person. That's you, Manuel.
Okay, so set the scene. So clearly, it doesn't sound like he had permission to get in there.
I won't say they didn't have permission to go up in the Acropolis. Because he had a permission to go up in the Acropolis, he made deals to go up in the Acropolis to make drawings and plaster cars.
Okay.
Right, he did have permission to go up, but that's about
Not
all.
to take
And
them.
he did that. He did make drawings, did make plaster cars.
Correct.
Until he got greedy and ripped one out,
But
and
he
then all
wasn't
hell
meant
broke
to
loose.
take them.
And the Turkish military governor, De Star, in the presence of Edward Daniel Clark, because he wrote books about it, and the governor came to view the works as they were about to take down one of the metops. And Lucieri said to Edward Daniel Clark that he wished an order be given to preserve rather than destroy such a glorious edifice. And as they were taking down this metop, the ropes broke and down come break into thousands of pieces with a thunder.
Wow.
And it is said in the book that the Turkish governor, with tears in his eyes, screamed out, "Telos." The word telos means the end, right? Unfortunately, Reverend Hunt, Lord Elgin's priest and secretary, with threats and bribes, continue. Bribes, remember, there's a big difference in buying and big difference in bribing. He managed to continue doing what he did.
So let's go back to what the British Museum says. So the British Museum has dedicated a large part of their website to trying to dispel a lot of these notions. And one of the questions that they pose on there is that the Parthenon sculptures now in the British Museum were stolen. This is this is what they're trying to dispel. And their response to that is, this isn't true. Lord Elgin, the British diplomat who transported the sculptures to England, acted with the full knowledge and permission of the legal authorities of the day in both Athens and London. Lord Elgin's activities were thoroughly investigated by a parliamentary select committee in 1815 and found to be entirely legal. Following a vote of Parliament, the British Museum was allocated funds to acquire the collection. Now, let's play devil's advocate for a moment and say that that's true. I mean, there's no other way to put it. Is this the right thing to do? Is this the way that you treat your neighbours?
It's wrong. We know very, very well that he had no authority, official authority. What he did it with bribes. I'll say it again and again, with bribes.
This is a country that was under occupation at the time.
Exactly.
And
Had
I
no
think-
say in the matter whatsoever.
I
Say.
think you've hit the nail on the head. When they say legal authority, in what context do they say that? Have they asked the Greek people if they recognise that as a legal authority?
That's it.
I mean, that's, you cannot pick and choose and cherry pick your history to make it work for you.
There's some significant evidence in these pages here on the British Museum's website that they're trying to push very much the fact that Greece had been under occupation for 350 odd years by that point. Do you think That justifies it? The length of the occupation justifies the actions?
I'm going to put this as simple so everyone can understand. Was terra nullius justified?
Yeah, right.
Okay,
just for our listeners, just explain quickly because they might not.
Okay, so when the British came to this country, they presumed terra nullius, that no one lived here. There was no living culture here. There was no people here. Therefore, they could just take over.
Fantastic.
Okay, so this is the same cultural heritage issues we're having across museums now. And that argument falls squarely, and again, I don't want to muddy the waters, but it falls squarely in that argument.
Right.
They had this high and mighty attitude as colonial Britain that they could just walk in and take whatever they want. Imperialism, cherry picking, and now, throwing back history in our face, just like you wouldn't say that, just like we've said, this
characterising locals as fauna as opposed to legitimate owners of the land.
These are serious issues, and I don't want to go into it without proper acknowledgement of country, and but that's as simple as it gets. How dare you turn around and say to people they've kept their culture and their language alive? If they were occupied and happily occupied, would they have fought a war of independence?
Yeah.
No. Would they have been massacred? No.
No. It's offensive. And they've got to change their tone, and they've got to change how they write things. And this is not... unfortunately, British Museum's probably copying up more than most, but there's other museums where, looting is apparent, that's happened, and they're stepping up to the plate. And the members are going to demand it more and more, and shareholders are going to demand it, and sponsors are going to demand it. And that's what we're looking at from a campaign perspective. Who wants to sponsor this exhibition? Really? Without really thinking about the issues that are involved or the offence, or thinking about the stories of other people that need to be told, that have lost their opportunity to express their cultural heritage. It's a significant issue, and the British have been very clever in trying to muddy the waters with legal arguments, and you don't have this and you don't have that. Very clever, I take my hat off to them, but it's very simple. Yeah. You took them under duress, an individual, and they can distance themselves. The acts of Lord Elgin didn't represent Britain at the time. We took them, and now we're going to correct history.
So a very important question now. We've mentioned previously that the Greek government does not want to take this issue to court, and there are a lot of people, around the world who have argued otherwise. There are people in Australia who are of that opinion as well. Why, in your opinion, is it important that this not go to court and that it is resolved diplomatically?
The way I see it personally, as a humble person, courts take years, and God knows how long could it drag on with issues such as this, such a big issue. It's not a little tiny issue. Yeah. It can drag on for years and cost millions and millions of dollars. Besides all that, even with the money and all that, Greece and England have been allies in 2 world wars. The politician looking at this thing as something very important to them. They don't want to spoil that over marbles. They can see that there is a way of getting them back without going to court. So they say, why should we go to court with our allies when we know we've got a winner? Because most of the people in England are in favour. All the polls in England are showing that they're in favour for the return. And you have British historians, for heaven's sake, not Greek historians, British historians telling us the truth, what happened, and why they should go back. In 1880, I think it was, Thomas Harrison, in an 8-page editorial, he writes in there about the Parthenon marbles, how they were stolen. He uses the term thief by the Lord Elgin. Now, this is years after they were in the British Museum, in 1880 or around that time. I can't remember the exact date, right? So this goes on all the time. You have British people in England that they know that it's wrong to be hanging on to something that doesn't belong to them. But if you're a lawyer or someone that's highly educated and you read these books, the British historian books, you can see the injustice by the British government and of the British Museum keep on hanging on to something that does not belong to them. They can see that. And the first thing comes to the mind, of course, is litigation, because that's what they're trying to do. That's their business.
Is it dangerous going to court, though? Is there a dangerous precedent to be set here?
I wouldn't call it dangerous, and I don't think,
We can't say that. We can't say that.
you can say it's dangerous, but the devil's in the detail, right? When you go to court. I know, I'm a lawyer. I do this. The devil's
That's
in the...
why we have you here.
Yeah, the devil's in the detail. What court are we going to? Who are we taking to court? The British Museum, the trustees, the individual trustees, individual directors,
the British government.
the British government, who,
Good point.
each of those considerations needs consideration. And all we are doing is...
Aggravating the things, that's all.
Aggravating, we're not moving forward.
That's it.
Okay, there's been a shift in history of how museums, and there are, and I know people put examples of looted artefacts from Jewish collections that have been found. These are different cases. These are cases of where it belonged to an individual, and there's provenance, and they're showing this provenance. Now, the Parthenon has provenance. That's pretty obvious. We know where it came from. There's no doubt about that, but these are different cases and are looked at differently. Sometimes they're in individual courts, not international court. Who's going to recognise the decision of the international court? There's another consideration we need to make. And a lot of the looting has been done diplomatically. So if you're looking at what was taken, during the Iraqi war and it was returned, that was a very big push by the American government to really look at, what was on the black market and whatever they found, and to return it. There was, the most successful return and repatriations have been done diplomatically. Yeah. Okay, so there's a lot of cases, and haven't wanted to get into it here, where diplomacy and, look, there's a question of, is the British Museum going to lose face over this?
That's my next question. I think Emmanuel touched on it. The British people, they're all for it.
Very much
Take
Very
marbles
much
back.
so. Yeah.
So the government, again, they're pushing it to the British Museum. So what do you think their real issue is? Why don't they want to
members
have
of
it back?
Parliament had come out and spoke for the return. British members of Parliament. Eddie O'Hara, who was the last, the chairman of the British Committee, passed away a couple of years ago. He was 20 years on federal parliament in London, 20 years.
Yeah.
And he became the chairman of the British Committee. You should listen to him making some speeches about the return of the marbles, And he was 20 years on parliament. You can go on and talk about this for hours and hours.
As much as it is...
But what is the real reason? What do you think it is?
Look, I will go back to where we started. If we come full circle, it's having a piece of the Parthenon is having a legitimacy to...
Do you think that's it? Is
well,
it a matter of saving face?
That makes sense.
There is a bit of saving face, but like I said, you can go from hero to zero. It's up to the British Museum. They can be the heroes in this and step forward and understand the new role of museums. And Greece is being diplomatic, and our committee is being diplomatic and very specific, not asking for everything. Okay, we're asking for the Parthenon marbles to be returned. That is the focus, and that's why we're trying to focus. All of this muddying of water is just, these types of statements on their websites are muddying the waters. There should be diplomatic talks. Enough's enough.
They shouldn't be asking for the Caryatides back. Now, originally, excuse me if I'm right, originally, when Marina Makuri asked for the marbles back, it was the Caryatida, the Ionian column, and a piece of cornice, three pieces from the Araction. But for some unknown reason, I can't find out, even as other people, officials in Greece, why they took them off, I don't know. But they made a very clear sense. They only want the Parthenon marbles. And there are a lot of people, you probably heard about them here and overseas, and in Greece, they keep screaming about that they want everything back, they want Caryatides back and all this. We're falling into the British government, British Museum trap, because they're saying it's going to open up the floodgates. And this is
It's
what
the
these
slippery
people are
slope
doing.
argument.
This is exactly what these people are doing. They're opening up the floodgates, but wanting this and want this and want that. They want...
But it's quite clear.
They shouldn't
we
be
only
saying
want
that.
whatever is left of the 160 metres of frieze of the Parthenon, and that's it.
About the 88, 89 pieces on total.
That's it. So all the other Greek antiquities in the Louvre, we don't want it.
It's not only frieze. You got the 15 metopes, and you got about 18, 19 pieces of the pediments, Eastern West pediment statuettes, right? So in total, it's about 89 pieces, or 90 with the little tiny ones.
Okay.
And that's all Greece wants. It made it very, very clear to the world. It's made it clear to me from the very beginning. except at the very, very beginning. I'm sorry, when they had the Caryatida and the Ionian column. And talking about the Ionian column, can I tell you something? You know, Greece doing a lot of restoration working up in the Acropolis, as you know.
Amazing
so
restoration.
They went to the British Museum and made a copy of the Ionian column that's in the British Museum to put it back up in the Erechtheion, the building next to the Parthenon, okay? And you can see it, it's white. Now, in order for the Greeks to go there and get that, you know what they had to do? They had to pay the British to get authority to make a copy of their own stolen cultural property.
Wow.
How disgusting that is. They had to pay to make a copy.
And I think these are the stories, you know, that we don't know. And, you know, it's very important when you've got someone like Emmanuel who has all of this history just at his fingertips because he's been so crucial. It's amazing when you listen to him. You know, your hair stands on end when you listen to him. Goosebumps. You get goosebumps and you're like, you know, he hasn't just been talking about it. He's writing the letters, he's, you know, campaigning.
You have to come to a lecture.
And
That's
I
all.
guess,
Lecture will tell you a lot.
And I guess
I'm learning a lot today.
Just on that, if we're looking at the condition of the Devane Gallery now, these pieces are not in a good place. There's water leaks, humidity. If they had the argument 30 years ago, you can't look after cultural heritage, well, that's turned around now, hasn't it? The tide is turning. And like I said, it's, you know, there's the British Museum does amazing research and cultural heritage work, and there's no reason for that to stop. And people will not stop going to the British Museum if that's what they're scared of. They will keep going to the British
Well,
Museum.
they had replicas there. Like, I'm sure people would still go and see
Greece
it.
is more than happy to do the replicas.
Greek government, actually it was a president of Greece, I've got it recorded, who said to the British Museum or British government that we will make a full set of copies at Greek government expense. We will pay for all the cost for the transportation to take him back to England. And as I said, give him a full set of copies. Thus, the British Museum is not left empty. And with today's technology, if you see the latest one, especially I've heard that they got some special in Germany called laser, they can make them. You can hardly tell the difference. You and I won't be able to tell the difference unless you're a professional. So
you could probably 3D print them in this day and age.
The British Museum won't be left empty. Right?
They actually have on ISMA, they've got an entire team that does the plaster casting, because if they've got to pull something apart or pull the mortar out, they do a full plaster cast, so that way when it is... I mean, it's incredible work. Yeah. Incredible. Yeah. So they've got a full plaster casting team, so don't worry, British Museum, we'll get you the casts.
Well, let's see what they actually say. So the British Museum, on that page where they're actually trying to dispel a lot of these notions, one of the notions is that the British Museum argues that the sculptures in their collection should remain in London because there's nowhere to house them in Greece and the Greek authorities can't look after them. Now, Emmanuel, you've already said that you've got letters where they have argued this in the past. What they officially say on their website is that neither of these claims is true, and the British Museum doesn't argue this. The trustees argue that the sculptures on display in London convey huge public benefit as part of the museum's worldwide collection. Our colleagues in Athens are, of course, fully able to conserve, preserve, and display the material in their own care. We admire the display in the Acropolis Museum, in which the Parthenon sculptures are complemented by casts of all those in London and elsewhere, creating as full a picture as is now possible of the original sculptural decoration of the temple. Now, going back to your point, Emmanuel, about the fact that the Greek team had to pay to be able to make these kind of molds. I mean, the British Museum here is trying to convey a level of collegiality and academic back and forth where we're all working on this together and whatnot. That's obviously not the case, given the fact that they need to pay to go in and see their own artifacts, is it?
Paramithia.
And I'll say, in 2007, when I had met Nikos Dogarnidis he was the head architect, and the preservation and conservation work, I mean, they are archiving every single rock they find on the Parthenon. Now, I think we all remember the bad days when people could just walk up to the Parthenon, maybe not in my living memory, but, people have stories and they could just take a rock.
Yep.
Now, that could have been from a very significant... We don't do that on archaeological sites anymore, thank God. Mm-hmm. But that's how much people wanted that piece of marble, To know that you have to do casts and cannot do a full restoration because they're just across the ditch in a different ditch way, is pretty heartbreaking. And to know that there may be other pieces that don't make sense until those pieces are all put together.
And this building in particular, because all of us probably have seen the documentaries and have read about it, there is no single piece in that building that is alike. They're not interchangeable pieces. They are all unique. They all need to be in a very specific part of the building in order for it to make sense. They look like interchangeable pieces when they're down on the ground, but as soon as you try to put it all together, it just doesn't work.
You know, I was invited to represent our committee in The Hague in 2003, and I was able to address to say that Lord Elgin's takings of the world's greatest single collection of classical Greek sculptures is probably the world's most celebrated cultural property dispute, because they were talking about cultural property that was taken from the Jewish people. And afterwards, at coffee break, Professor Norm Palmer, you probably don't know who he is, he was one of the people with Geoffrey Robertson that wrote look up the legalities for the marbles. Anyhow, he was there. I met him before in Sydney, and we've been friends. And he said to me, "There's a lady here from the British government, didn't like what you said in the court." I said, "Well, where is she?" So he took me over, introduced me to her, and she turned and she says to me, "You tell your minister, Professor Venizelos," Professor Venizelos at the time was the Minister for Culture, "you tell your minister, Professor Venizelos, to be more cooperative and more understanding, and how dare he comes to the to London to launch the new Acropolis Museum opposite the British Museum. How degrading for the British Museum." She wanted like that. I'm standing there smiling in front of her, you know. And when she finished, I said to her, "Madam, first of all, he is not my minister. I'm an Australian." That rocked her straight away. And I said, "And after all the minister wants something that belongs to the Parthenon. And the Parthenon happens to be in Athens, not in London." And everybody clapped around. They were listening by this time. And a man jumps in and he says what you were saying then. He says, "Mr. Whatever you call me." No, he called me sir. "Sir, I'm in favour for the marbles to go back up on the Parthenon where they were taken, and not in from one museum to another museum." I said, "Excuse me, do you know the irreparable damage that was caused to the marbles and to the building?" He said, "I'm not an architect, but they cut pieces off and threw them away. It's impossible to be put back up there." "Oh," he said, "I didn't know that." "Well, you're learning," I said to him, you know. So then afterwards, there was a German solicitor there, and he grabbed me from the side. He says, "Can we go have a bit of a chat?" So I gave him a bit of a talk about the Parthenon. He gives me his card, and I still have his card, a young solicitor. And he said, "Mr. Commoner, rest assured, from now on, whenever anybody speaks about the Parthenon in my presence, I'll be in 100% in favour for the return," because he saw the light, you know. And this is encouraged, but this is what we want people to be talking about. Professional people knowing what they're talking about for the return.
Let's talk about the museums really quickly. I've been to the British Museum, have obviously been to the Acropolis Museum was there in its first year of opening and whatnot. What are your views on both of those institutions? Obviously, they're both doing good work in their own right. In terms of being a world-class museum, what are your thoughts about the Acropolis Museum?
You know what I say to the British all along? I say, "Thank you very much for looking after them to the best of your knowledge and ability." To the best of your knowledge and ability, okay? Let's forget about whether it took them legally or illegally. Let's forget about the irreparable damage caused in the British Museum. But now please do the right thing and let's undo one of the great wrongs of history and break it right and bring it back to Greece. That's the end of the argument. Can't go any more than that.
Look, for me, the museum in the Acropolis represents the new age of museums, of what we call source nations. One, it's an architectural masterpiece. You know, so from an architectural perspective, it's beautiful. The fact that it maintains that connection visually to the Parthenon, yes, it's beautiful. You know, is it from a personal, I have other favourite museums that I've been to, and one of them is the Byzantine Museum in Thessaloniki. You know, there was, you know, there's just, you know, that's just a personal thing. The British Museum, to me, yes, there's a lot of great work and great pieces. You know, I prefer the V&A. It does still have that curiosity box type look of a museum that needs to change. But there are pieces of incredible history in there. You can't stop looking at it. Of course there are. You can't compare museums.
Yeah.
That's a very difficult thing because it's very personal. Things were built differently and whatever. But has Greece, hit top marks with the new museum? 100%.
Yeah,
and
right.
to have that visual connection, and not only that
scale.
The scale, but it's of a recessive nature that goes into the landscape, so it's not dominating the Parthenon or the Acropolis. It's what we all try to achieve in cultural heritage or built heritage. Letting the architecture of the true heritage piece speak for itself. So it's ticked all the boxes. The British Museum is the British Museum. It's an institution.
Yep.
We've all grown up studying pieces in the British Museum.
There's nothing British about it.
Can I tell you
There's
about
a lot
that?
of non-British in there.
Let me tell you something about that. Last time I was in London with my wife, it was in 2016, where we had the commemorative event marking 200 years on the day, 7th of June 1816 to 7th of June 2016, that the British government passed a motion to buy the Acropolis Marbles, including the famous Parthenon Marbles.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went on a bus tour around London with my wife, special touring bus, and they were telling us about the various buildings here and there and everywhere. Then all of a sudden the guide says, we're now going past outside the British Museum. Now listen to this. I don't know why they call it British Museum, because nothing there is British and everything in there is stolen goods. Now this is the guide, said that to all of us.
Wow. Okay.
I got the shock of my life. I couldn't believe. Could you imagine someone saying that 20 years ago? He would have got the sack.
Yeah.
He was a tour guide.
Well, let me ask you something. So there's one thing that doesn't sit well with me, and it's something that sort of came up initially when Stephen Fry, was part of that Intelligence Squared debate, I think in 2011 or 2012.
2012.
In the comments after the debate, one of the people in the audience said, it may have even been Tristram Hunt, who was on the other side, saying words to the effect of that Greeks should be immensely proud of the fact that these sculptures are in the British Museum. And I mean, the fact that they say on their website, Parthenon sculptures are a vital element in this interconnected world collection. To me personally, that in many ways puts their status down a number of rungs. Now, as Greeks, we see them as this is the absolute pinnacle of history. This is the pinnacle of our culture. We don't see them as one of many. We see them as this is it.
Well, as I said earlier, even the dust that was taken off, that belongs to Greece and got to go back to Greece. Those statues, there's no argument, no talk about it. They've got to go back to Greece. As simple as that. They belong to Greece. It's a Greek cultural heritage. Even a Prime Minister replied a letter to me, Australian Prime Minister, John Hare, I think it was. He said, the Parthenon marbles are an irreplaceable part of Greek heritage and national identity.
Yep.
National identity. You find me a Greek house anywhere in the world that haven't got a picture of the Panayiotis Parthenon.
Yeah.
There wouldn't be one house anywhere of Greek heritage in the world, not just in Australia, that they would have a photo of the Parthenon. That's how much, it's a symbol of Greece.
Going back to, this is one of many antiquities.
Yes.
Why is this so special? And there's a lot of factors, as we've clearly discussed today. But I will go back to, we have to pause and think, why was this building built in honour, of not just a battle or a victory, but a philosophy, a new philosophy that changed the course of the world.
Yep. That
all of a sudden you have a right in government. So you're not just going to go and fight. These people were fighting for the freedom of Hellenism. So you're not going to go fight for a king and then you're going to get some spoils by way of, a couple of gold rings or whatever you loot from the nearest temple, whatever you're doing on your plundering and pillaging. These people were fighting for a philosophy of freedom. That's irreplaceable. And that's why the argument has to be kept in context. We're coming down. It's not just the ancient Greeks. This ideal of freedom and fighting for freedom, we just celebrated it now on Ohi Day, is part of what makes you a Hellene. It's complementary to the term philotimo. There's no translation. We know it. We feel it. Sometimes we know that people are telling us this is the way you've got to do it, and we're like, no, because I'm choosing to do it differently just for the fact that I'm Greek and I have a choice. Okay, it's embedded in our DNA and has been drummed into us. And, comments of, this was the legitimate government. No, Greeks were fighting for their freedom for 400 years of occupation. Greeks continued to fight for their freedom. And these marbles represent, they are a stigma of when they were occupied, and they're, that they didn't have a say back then. They couldn't have a say back then. And to have taken them from the Greeks is a real slap in the face. And then to throw comments that, this was the legitimate government is making it worse. No, this is a real stigma that's hung up from those days of occupation. And this is the living memory of these pieces. They are not just another piece of antiquity. They mean so much more. And that's why the focus is, and on the frieze, chaos over, democracy. It's the pieces themselves that we haven't really got into are speaking of that democracy and order over chaos.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, look, we've had some interesting points. You guys have just blown me away. I've actually sat here silent listening to you guys speak. It's like I'm at a lecture listening to you guys.
You can talk on this all day. Weeks and
I'm
months.
sure you guys can. Yeah, I'm just trying to ingest everything you're saying.
I feel like this isn't the last discussion we're going to have about this.
Yeah, I just feel like we haven't even touched the surface.
Yeah.
Listening to you guys speak.
When you're ready to finish, I'd like to say something when you're ready to finish.
Yeah, well, actually, I was just going to get to I think we should sort of look at rounding it up and what are the next steps? So we've heard all the arguments, we've heard why they need to come back. What can we do? What's the next steps?
Continue
how?
Continue what we've been doing. But the most important thing, the way I see it, is to support a very distinguished British committee in London.
Right.
British committee, British people speaking to British people. I've been all around the world giving lectures all these years. I've been international conferences. It's cost me thousands of dollars out of my pocket. Even the international conference that we're having, every debate we're having outside London,
Sure.
to me, on the bottom line, it's just a window dressing to the British government and to the British people. They don't take it notice. They couldn't care less how many committee meetings we have. They don't care how many functions we have, how many letters I write or you write to them. It's got to come from the British people to the British people, because they walk on the same street, they speak the same language, they go to the football together, they sit in the same restaurant together. And besides, if I go to London, I say to the Prime Minister with Dora and you and say, send us the marbles back to Greece, come on, do the right thing. Oh, yeah, we'll look into it, Mr. Comino, we'll let you know. Or he can say, why don't you go back to where you come from? But I distinguish English people go in there and speak to them. He can say, go home and leave us alone, because he needs his vote.
Yeah.
Right? So he cannot say that. So it's been all along Melina Mercouri's, that was Melina Mercouri's way of doing it. She didn't want Greeks involved at all at the beginning. She didn't want any Greek involved in the British committee. She just wanted British people, and they're all British people, except one lady. She had an English name, Eleni Cubitt, right? She was born there. She married an Englishman, and her husband was the one who was the founder of the British committee. Okay, so that's how I see it. My experience tells me that British people, distinguished British people, going to get the marbles back for us by speaking to the distinguished British members of Parliament and British Museum.
What message would you have now for the British people out there? So the whole world's
to
listening
continue
to you
what
now.
they've been doing.
And what are we doing? What do they need to do? What are the ones that haven't done anything yet?
Yes, they've done a lot. But let's put it this way. The British committee is made up with a lot of academics. You can't expect academics to be like me to go around and ask you for favours, for money. Any committee, as you know, needs funds, and a lot of funds to function properly. Okay? No committee can function properly without money. And as I said, you can't expect them to go around asking for funds. It's not possible. They can do so many things with the money.
I think we have a very good connection with the British Committee, and we're working tirelessly with the British Committee. So we're the international organising committee in Australia for the restitution of Parthenon Marbles. I'm sure that can go on your podcast notes. We've got Facebook, Twitter, websites where you can get updates on what we're doing, on what letters we're sending. Further to that, please go on the ISMA websites to see what the
Sure.
what
How do you spell that one, Theodora?
So that's a YSMA, but it's for Restoration Committee for the Greek government. So once you put it up, ISMA Parthenon, it'll come up.
So was that on Facebook, you said?
ISMA has its own, so that's from the Greek government, so you can see what the Greek government, so they've got their own website and Facebook and publications. You can write in and get the publications. I do believe that Greek voices need to be heard in this because it is our cultural heritage. I have been fighting this campaign for a very, very long time, and I'm very proud that I'm a Greek woman and I'm of migrant background that's taking it up to them, and I'm really proud to be doing that, and I'm very proud to be following in Emmanuel's legacy, and we're offensive. I mean, I've done quite a few lectures where people said, "Don't you think, Miss, you've gone a little bit too far in calling it cultural vandalism?" And I'm like, no.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
There are still people who think that this is not cultural
There's
vandalism.
still people calling me Miss. What are you talking about? Who does that in this day and age? So, we've got, our committee is focused. It's working with the Greek government. It's working with, we want to reach as many Greek committees here that want to help us. I do feel the Greek voice needs to be heard, and I do feel it needs to be a little bit more structured. So I'm happy to send people to our website. We've got, on Facebook, it's a bit serious. Website's a bit more. Put your photos of the Parthenon on there. Yep. Really, we had a great thing. Really put your photos on there. Show us your favourite photos of the Parthenon, because we want to show this is a living cultural heritage. It belongs to us. And in 2007, I summed up the argument with one word, and that's epistrophy.
Yep.
That's all we need to say.
Okay.
Return. Epistrophy, and that's it.
Yep.
Beautiful. Well said.
Okay.
Fantastic. Emmanuel, you said that you wanted to wrap things up with a story before. And
Yeah. When we did our very first international colloquy between the British committee, our committee, and the USA committee, 3 continents, okay? And the chairman, as I said earlier, was Eddie O'Hara. And in his speech, he said something that I took it on, go a little bit further, that the Parthenon marbles in the British Museum did not belong to the British government, do not belong to the British Museum, don't belong to Greece. They don't belong to Greece. And they belong to themselves. So I took it upon that, and I say, not only they don't belong to the British government or the British Museum, they don't belong to the World Heritage they keep talking about. They don't belong to Greece. If they don't belong to Greece, they don't belong to World Heritage. They belong to themselves only, because only when they're together, all together, they can tell us, they speaking to us, they're telling us of 2,500 years of Greek history that were tortured, tormented, betrayed, but always glorious Greek history. That's what those marbles are telling us. And they could only tell us that when they're all together in the new Acropolis Museum that was specially designed and built for them. And that is why I say the Parthenon marbles do not belong to anybody else but to themselves, because they speak to you what they represent. As I said once again, 2,500 years of glorious Greek history. That's what they're telling us. Thank you.
outstanding.
Well said, Manuel. I'm getting goosebumps again.
Yeah.
This is a fantastic way to end the segment, Tom.
I think so. Guys, thank you so much for being here. And I like I said before, I suspect this is going to be the first conversation of many, because we really have only scratched the surface, haven't we, Nick?
You know what? I had a shitload of questions to ask you guys, and I probably
That's the first time you've sweared.
I have. I normally swear in every podcast.
I know.
Olga does a lecture and you learn more and you can record it and then you'll have it. You go and give the same lecture yourself.
We'd
You'll
love
learn
to.
a lot from a lecture, I can tell you.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you swore first, because it was touch and go there for a moment.
Is that
We
Is
thought
it
there's
episodic?
adults in the room today. We've got to behave ourselves.
Well, if you keep putting on this spread, we'll be definitely coming. Is this Renga from Millway?
It is
It
actually.
is.
Well, I'll be
yes,
going
we
there
did.
this afternoon. Thank you,
Oh
Millway.
my! See, there you go. We've got rega, we've got salamis, we've got anchovies. We've
I
got
take
all
it
sorts
you're
of
a
stuff.
regular there, Theodora.
We've got Ouzo
Maybe.
too. We've got Ouzo too.
We've got everything.
Yeah, Millway,
Yeah,
you're outstanding.
We got Sipuro. What is that, Tsipuros?
The tsipuro that we've got today is Mavrakis.
What part of Greece is that from? Mind you,
sounds
that
Cretan.
it's funny.
Argos.
It's funny how you haven't asked me what part of Greece my family's from. I'm a bit
Tell
disappointed.
us a bit, Theodora.
From Thessalia, that's why I know that Tsipuro. I'm not going to have
Is
Ouzo.
that
Sipro is dynamite.
Depends who makes it. You know, if you got the Iperotes making
Yeah,
it, then
that's
might
good
be
stuff.
not that good. But
Yeah.
you know, if you got the Thessaly making it, then it's a bit finer. more
Really?
refined,
Ooh,
yeah.
another debate coming along here.
Well, just before we wrap up, Theodora's got a lot of knowledge about a number of things, including Greek wine and food and all sorts of things. So I dare say it's not going to be the last time we're going to have her on this show. Nick, a fantastic discussion, and again, Theodora and Emmanuel, thank you so much for being here and having this discussion with us.
Pleasure for being here. Thank you
Yeah,
for having
thank you
us.
guys. It was fantastic having you guys listening to tell all your stories. And Emmanuel, I could just see you're a wealth of knowledge, and all your stories, I just can't get enough of them. This is the second time I've met you, and we've probably spoken for over 4 hours, and I feel like I'm just touching the surface with you.
You know what I'm worried about? I'm worried about because people have asked me after I give a lecture, is this recorded? I said, no, words at all. I said, it's in here. And when I die, that guy dies with me. That's why I want somebody to record it. So at least I can have it.
It's on Ouzo Talk for life.
That's it.
Got a long way to go, Manuel. We're not letting go of you yet.
Absolutely.
And you too, Theodora, fantastic. Some of your comments that you made, look, we all agree with you. And just repeat, how can we help out again? You want us to get on to what are the sites?
So you can get on International Organising Committee for Australia for the restitution of the Parthenon Marbles. We've got Twitter, Facebook page, website, if you want to see what the Greek government is doing. And please, the Greek government is doing a lot, and our committee is very supportive of the Greek government. ISMA, they also have publications. You might want to sign up to those. And reach out to us, and Manuel, myself, Russell, or someone else from the committee. It is a personable committee. We will reach out personally if you really have something you want to contribute to the campaign. I'm sure we can find something for you to do. Post your photo of the Parthenon on the Facebook page. Get onto that right now. I know there's some great ones out there.
I will do that as well.
I'll be doing that, and look, we'll share that on our Facebook as well. So it's at Ouzo Talk. Is our handle on Facebook, and I think we're going to probably have a website coming up fairly soon, and a range of other things, aren't we, Nick?
Once we get off our asses, mate.
Absolutely.
Is that why I'm dizzy? I've been drinking Ouzo. I thought it was water.
We need to top you up.
We tricked you.
Guys, look, again, this is something that we're very passionate about, and we're gonna continue to do as much as we can to support this cause. Nick, thank you very much. We've got. We need to thank our sponsors, Greek Providore. Visit thegreekprovidore.com.au. Millaway Allwood Wines at 285 Homer Street, Allwood, and Mooch and Me at Brighton Les Sands. Nick Athanasiou, thank you very much, mate. Always a pleasure.
Oh, thank you, mate. Look, it's great hosting you guys. It's like having friends in the house again.
Always.
Conversation is exceptional. Having legends like you guys in the house. I'm lost for words, Tom. This is actually blowing me away, this conversation.
Absolutely.
There's a lot I learned as well. I thought I knew a little bit about Parthenon marbles and why we want them back, and a little bit about them, but you guys have just taken it to another level. I feel like I'm at a university lecture listening to you guys speak. It's information we're getting is beyond
What the
any words
Parthenon
can
marbles
describe.
mean, not only to us, but what it really means to the Greek history.
Yeah, it does. And look, and you touched on it as well. Our sponsors, we couldn't do this without our sponsors.
Absolutely.
Greek Providore, you girls rock. You guys did really well. The food, it's all disappeared. So thank you so much for the olives. And
I'm just going to say that Christmas is wrapped up for me with the Greek Providore. Thank you very much. That's
there you go.
hamper.
Yeah.
Thank you, girls.
Yeah,
I'll
good
be
It's fantastic.
ordering tonight. Done.
Fantastic.
They're unreal. And wait till you meet them as well. They've all got a story to tell, those girls. And our favourite bloke, Harry, what a legend he is. He's provided us with his tsipro. He said it's his favourite tsipro. Harry, I might have to agree with you, actually. I usually get mine, if you heard the first podcast, I usually get my tsipro from Mountains of Ipro in a Pepsi bottle.
Smuggled in.
That's another story. But this tsipro, this Mavrakis brand that you've got, it is good stuff.
Outstanding.
I've heard of him.
It's kept me silent, actually, nearly for 2 hours. You knocked me out.
Fantastic, guys. Well, that wraps up Ouzo Talk for our 4th episode. Again, Look us up on Facebook. Make sure you're subscribing to the podcast via your favourite podcasting app. And we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you all. Thank you, guys.